We have an individual who's pled guilty now, and he's looking at a 15-year mandatory minimum. And I've heard from several people who said that's way too long for someone just trying to buy sex with a child. Well, with Mr. Gravens, during his online chats, he said, I see you have a 12-year-old. I really want a 10-year-old, but I'll take the 12-year-old if I don't have to use condoms and I can take pictures. Before people judge and say, you're being harsh on these guys, you should see what we see.
I was just sick, but it told me this. We have to dig in and fight.
I really believe that most buyers felt like they weren't going to get caught, and I think also that if they did get caught, nothing was going to happen to them.
Shared Hope conducted a study in 2014 of buyers, and we found that 26% of the buyers of commercial sex with kids did not spend a day in jail. We've got a serious problem of tolerance.
My own ignorance was my biggest barrier. And it wasn't until I became a member of the Governor's Council, it wasn't until I went to the Shared Hope Conference that I understood that even in our own community, we probably have a problem.
Juvenile sex trafficking is recruiting, enticing, harboring, transporting, obtaining, maintaining a minor for commercial sex. Some states are now starting to include purchasing and soliciting. That's to clarify that buyers are part of the crime of sex trafficking.
We think that there are two types of buyers who end up in situations where they're caught for trying to buy a minor. One, we think, is they just want to buy sex and they don't care if she's 17 or she's 18. And then there are people who are specifically looking for a minor.
We're getting buyers that are doctors, attorneys, from law enforcement, people that make a substantial amount of money, to the guy that just came off the construction site.
My experience was that it was the stereotype that we always hear about, that they have families, that they have careers.
So we've had a physician, we've had an air traffic controller.
Older, younger, married, not married.
The age range of our offenders went from age 17 up to around 60, almost 70 years old.
The only really consistent trend we've seen is that they're males.
A disturbing trend that we found was that the younger the victim, the more money that was offered to have sex with that child.
Some of the buyer cases we've done, we absolutely have found evidence. They've brought tape, guns, zip ties, things along those lines.
There were several times that I was raped in a car and shoved out of a car.
They feel much more comfortable shopping on the internet. They can do it from their workplace, they can do it from their home. There's a large number of men out there that are looking for these girls, knowing that they can abuse them, rob them, rape them, and they're going to get away with it, and they're going to go on to their next victim.
When I was able to sit in a room face-to-face with victims and hear from their perspective, and that's what gave me an understanding of the victimization in sex trafficking in general.
They don't do this because they want to, they do this because they have to. They're doing this because they receive beatings or they're kept loaded up on drugs.
It's in our face when you start interviewing these girls and listening to them that how violent and how much control there is with the trafficker.
And it's taken several years to see that, after talking to hundreds and hundreds and probably well into 1,000 different women out there, to really see them as victims.
They're sold a lie by the traffickers that they're going to live this great and glamorous life, when in fact they wind up getting beaten and they have to sell their bodies and they catch sexually transmitted diseases, they wind up in the hospital. It's anything but a glamorous life.
One of the critical gaps in addressing sex trafficking is the failure to address demand as a crime of sex trafficking.
Buyers have just as much of a role as the traffickers do.
If we want to address the supply of sex trafficking, then of course you need to go after the demand.
Obviously, if we don't have the demand side, the traffickers aren't going to be making money.
So the traffickers are horrible people, but the buyers really are the ones that drive this industry.
If you really want to make a difference in trafficking, you have to hit both sides.
The Scottsdale Police Department over the last year or so has run 2 different stings targeting buyers of underage girls.
Our office has now been involved in 3 different undercover operations designed to reduce demand.
We also do stings just almost 2 to 3 times a week. We're out there looking for buyers.
When we're communicating as a juvenile with a buyer, we are very clear that we're a juvenile in those interactions.
We're identifying people that knowingly want to have sex with a child.
It can be a lot of effort and a lot of work and coordination to do these types of stings, but in my opinion, they're 100% worth it.
I think it takes a team, whether it be officers who understand the dynamics behind prostitution and see the women as victims, to a district attorney who is very aggressive and works directly with the officers, to having advocates out there who can be there to help the women.
You really want to have a relationship built with your prosecutors.
If they're not on board at the front end, you can arrest all the people you want and you're probably not going to get your cases prosecuted.
We have a real strong partnership, a real strong relationship with all of our local law enforcement agencies. It's been a team effort from the beginning.
I couldn't have prosecuted most cases without my victim advocate. I had an advocate sit next to my victim for 3 days waiting for her time to testify. It just changes the way that you prosecute cases.
To truly impact demand, it has to be a cross-jurisdictional response. If you simply focus in one area, you're going to push the issue to the outlying suburbs or the outlying communities.
Serious financial penalties not only are a serious deterrent, but they're also a tool for funding the restoration of victims.
We've seen in Arizona with our DUI laws that have become extremely strict that the number of DUIs have gone down because everybody knows it's going to cost them about $10,000.
Well, to deter men from buying sex, they don't want people to know.
That's the big thing that they're worried about is, is my boss going to find out? Is my wife going to find out? Are they going to get letters sent to my house where my wife can find it?
But I can think of a lot of instances where we would get calls the night after one of these stings and the buyer would say, please, 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 just don't tell my family, don't tell my job.
And so when the local media follows cases and prints results in the paper, that serves to raise awareness among the local population about what sort of conduct is condoned, what sort of conduct is not to be engaged in. Being part of a solution of any problem is a much better place to be in than simply being reactive.
What we've done is we've been able to drill down on it. And if other communities would do this same thing, they would realize that they also have these online predators in their communities and they also have these sex traffickers in their communities.
When you handle your first prosecution of one of these and you're able to kind of take the blinders off and see the scope, there's a fire that's under you at that point.
These things are achievable by departments big and small, but we would be happy to share that information that we've developed here and provide that information to other departments that are willing to do this.
Anybody who has a question, who wants to talk about it further, who wants to initiate an operation, call me.
I think what we're asking for in this movement is for communities to become brave and to say, this is dangerous for our kids, this is dangerous for our families, this is dangerous for our communities.
What I want to say to the buyers is we're coming after you. If you think you're safe and you think nobody knows what you're doing, that's coming to an end across the country because we have more and more law enforcement agencies coming on board and we're coming after the buyers.